You're probably telling yourself a familiar story. She went quiet, pulled back, created space, and the mind rushes to the simplest explanation. She doesn't care anymore. That story hurts, but it feels clean. It gives you something to react to. The problem is that it's often wrong. Distance is not always rejection. Silence is not always an ending. Sometimes what looks like loss of interest is actually fear showing up in the only way it knows how. Here's what most people never learn. When real emotional closeness happens, it doesn't feel safe to everyone. For some people, connection doesn't signal comfort, it signals danger. The moment things start to feel meaningful, the moment vulnerability becomes real instead of theoretical, their nervous system reads it as a threat. Not because you did something wrong, but because closeness has been paired with pain in their past. You've been trained to read behavior in a very basic way. More contact means more interest. Less contact means less interest. But human emotions aren't that linear. Someone can care deeply and still pull away. Someone can feel drawn to you and still create distance. Not because they don't want you, but because wanting you wakes up old fears they never learned how to soothe. When she was light, playful, open, and engaged, everything felt easy. Then something shifted. A deep conversation, a moment of honesty, a shared vulnerability, a sense that this was becoming real. After that, the energy changed. Messages slowed. Initiation dropped, availability shrank. You replay every interaction trying to find the mistake. You assume you moved too fast, said too much, or weren't enough in some invisible way. But often, she isn't thinking about what you did wrong. She's thinking about what it would mean if this went right. She's thinking about how much she's already invested emotionally. She's feeling the risk of loss before the loss has even happened. And for someone who learned early that closeness leads to hurt, the safest move feels like pulling back. This is where most men lose themselves. The distance triggers anxiety. Anxiety demands action, so they text more, explain more, ask more questions, try harder to reassure, try harder to fix. They believe effort equals care, and care will bring her back. But that reaction usually does the opposite. It turns stability into pressure. It turns presence into pursuit. What she felt safe with at first was your groundedness. Your calm, your sense that you had a life and direction beyond her. When you panic, even quietly, that energy shifts. You stop being the steady place she could land and become another emotional variable she has to manage. Her fear reads that shift instantly, even if she can't explain it in words. This isn't about playing games or pretending not to care. It's about understanding emotional regulation. When someone pulls away out of fear, they are testing something without consciously intending to. They are testing whether closeness with you means losing control or whether it can exist alongside stability. Your reaction answers that question. If you collapse emotionally when she creates space, you confirm her worst expectation, that intimacy leads to instability. If you chase reassurance, you teach her that connection with you comes with emotional weight she has to carry. That doesn't feel safe to someone already afraid of getting hurt. The truth most people don't want to hear is this. You cannot fix someone's fear for them. You cannot reason them into trust. You cannot love them into emotional safety. That work belongs to them. Your role is not to rescue, manage, or convince. Your role is to remain yourself. Remaining yourself means staying rooted in your life, even when uncertainty shows up. It means not letting someone else's emotional withdrawal become the center of your emotional world. It means understanding that space does not require punishment or pleading. It requires steadiness. When intimacy triggers fear, space becomes a coping mechanism. It's how she calms her nervous system. If you interpret that space as rejection and react from panic, you turn a temporary retreat into a permanent one. Not because you weren't enough, but because you abandoned your center trying to pull her back. There is a quiet strength in not rushing to fill every silence. There is emotional maturity in letting someone feel what they feel without trying to control it. That doesn't mean you disappear or become cold. It means you don't make her fear your emergency. You are allowed to want connection. You are allowed to care. But when caring turns into self-abandonment, attraction erodes. Stability is felt, not argued. Safety is sensed, not explained. To understand how to respond when someone pulls back, you have to first understand what's really happening inside the body, not just the emotions. When a person has a history of emotional pain, their nervous system becomes highly sensitive to closeness. Intimacy doesn't just activate feelings, it activates memory. The body remembers past hurt even when the mind wants something new. When connection deepens, their system can flip into protection mode. Heart rate changes, sleep gets lighter, thoughts become restless. The body interprets emotional exposure the same way it would interpret danger. Pulling away becomes a form of self-regulation. Space feels like relief. Control feels like safety. This is why explanations, reassurances, and emotional pressure rarely work in these moments. You're speaking to the rational mind, but the reaction is happening in the nervous system. No amount of logic can override a body that feels threatened. What actually calms fear is consistency without pressure, presence without pursuit, strength without force. The man who handles this well doesn't do more. He does less, but he does it better. He doesn't withdraw in anger or chase in anxiety. He stays steady. He continues his routines. He keeps his body moving, his work progressing, his social world alive. This isn't distraction. This is regulation. When you stay connected to your purpose, your nervous system stays calm. Calm is contagious. Even at a distance, people feel it. When she checks back in, consciously or unconsciously, she's sensing whether the emotional field feels safe or demanding. If it feels demanding, she pulls away again. If it feels grounded, she relaxes. This is where many people misunderstand self-respect. They think it means being distant or cold. It doesn't. Self-respect means you don't sacrifice your emotional stability to manage someone else's fear. You don't over-explain. You don't audition for reassurance. You don't try to earn consistency by giving up your center. If she reaches out after a period of distance, you don't interrogate her. You don't punish her silence. You don't pretend nothing happened either. You simply meet her energy with calm warmth. You respond like someone whose life remained intact, regardless of her absence. That response alone communicates something powerful. Closeness with you doesn't cost stability. Over time, that experience can gently rewire fear. Not because you forced it, but because you modeled something different. A connection where space doesn't cause collapse, where presence doesn't demand performance, where interest doesn't equal pressure. It's also important to understand your own health in this dynamic. Chronic anxiety, rumination, and emotional chasing activate stress hormones. Elevated cortisol over time affects sleep, focus, immune function, and mood. When you tie your emotional state to someone else's availability, your body pays the price. Learning to regulate yourself isn't just about attraction. It's about mental and physical well-being. Letting go of outcome is one of the healthiest things you can do here. Not in a hopeless way, but in a grounded way. You allow the connection to unfold without gripping it. You accept that not every bond is meant to stabilize, and not every person is ready for depth at the same time you are. If the pattern repeats, if closeness always leads to withdrawal and no growth follows, that's information. It tells you where she is emotionally. Walking away at that point isn't rejection, it's self-care. Prolonged inconsistency is stressful to the body and erodes self-trust. Choosing stability is choosing health. You are not responsible for healing someone's past. You are responsible for not abandoning yourself in the process. Real connection doesn't require self-sacrifice. It requires alignment. Two regulated nervous systems can move toward each other without fear running the show. At some point, every situation like this asks you a deeper question. Not about her, but about you. Are you trying to build connection, or are you trying to escape loneliness? Those two motivations feel similar on the surface, but they create very different outcomes in the body and in relationships. When someone becomes the solution to your emotional discomfort, the relationship turns into a pressure system. When someone is a companion to an already full life, the connection can breathe. Knowing when to stay open and when to step away isn't about rules or timelines. It's about patterns and how your body feels inside them. If moments of closeness are followed by fear, withdrawal, and silence, but no reflection or growth ever follows, your nervous system never gets to rest. You stay in a state of waiting, interpreting, hoping. Over time, that uncertainty creates chronic stress. Chronic emotional stress shows up physically. Tension in the chest, shallow breathing, disrupted sleep, reduced concentration, lowered immunity. The body doesn't distinguish between emotional threat and physical threat. It responds to both the same way. This is why protecting your emotional health is a health decision, not just a romantic one. Staying open means being available without attachment to outcome. It means you can enjoy connection when it's present without clinging to it when it's not. It means you're honest with yourself about what you need. And if you need consistency and emotional presence to feel well, that's not weakness, that's awareness. Stepping away doesn't require anger or blame, it requires clarity. If someone repeatedly shows that they cannot meet you in the same emotional space, believing them is an act of self-respect. You don't need to diagnose their wounds or justify your exit. You simply recognize that love should not require constant self-regulation to survive. Healthy relationships feel steady more often than they feel intense. They create energy instead of draining it. They allow your body to relax instead of staying on alert. You feel more like yourself, not less. That's one of the clearest signs that something is right. This doesn't mean fear never appears. It means fear is met with communication and responsibility, not disappearance. It means both people are willing to notice their patterns and work with them. When only one person is doing that work, imbalance forms, and imbalance always costs health. You don't become valuable by being chosen. You are valuable because you exist, because you grow, because you take responsibility for your life. The right connection recognizes that without needing you to prove it. It doesn't test your worth through absence. And if she comes back with openness, accountability, and consistency, you can meet her there. Slowly, calmly, without rushing or reopening old wounds. If she comes back with the same cycle and no awareness, you're allowed to choose differently. Walking away from instability is not giving up. It's choosing peace. The strongest position you can hold is not control, and it's not detachment. It's self-trust, trusting that you will respond to life in ways that protect your health, your dignity, and your growth. Trusting that connection is meant to add to your life, not consume it. You cannot carry someone else's fear without eventually carrying their pain. Compassion does not require self-sacrifice. Love does not require suffering. When connection is right, it supports your nervous system instead of overwhelming it. You were whole before this person entered your life. You remain whole regardless of what they choose. That understanding creates a quiet confidence. From that place, you don't chase, you don't beg, and you don't harden. You stay open and grounded at the same time. The goal isn't to be chosen by someone who is unsure. The goal is to build a life and inner stability that naturally aligns with someone who can meet you there. When that happens, closeness doesn't feel like danger. It feels like home.